Hi everyone, I had a viewer request relatively recently asking if I would kind of compare and contrast Alana Fairchild's decks with Lucy Cavendish's decks and go a little bit more in depth than what I typically do in a review. So I thought this was really interesting, really great question or slash request. And I've been sitting with this, and my feeling is that I kind of want to go for the decks that I think are in a similar feeling place for each of these two deck creators, as opposed to just like willy-nilly comparing and contrasting. So for today, I'm going to compare and contrast Alana Fairchild's Divine Circus Oracle with Lucy Cavendish and Jasmine Beckett Griffith's Oracle of the Shapeshifters deck. Now I'm going to give you the reason why as I unbox the decks themselves. I feel that both of these decks are encouraging you to work with specific energies in order to come to understand an aspect of yourself better. And so you might turn to either of these decks for some type of self-understanding or shadow work or any type of personal work that's a little bit deeper than kind of like a surface everyday question you might ask of your cards. So specifically in Oracle of the Shapeshifters, you are working with kind of spirit animal energy, but these are more creatures of a fantastical nature, even though I do feel like Lucy brings in traditional like shamanic animal meanings for the different choices she made for each card. With Alana's deck, Divine Circus, we are looking instead at kind of these very precocious, rebellious, kind of circus-themed energies. You know, circus like darker energies in some cases, more contrary energies, I would say. And I think of Lucy's decks that I've worked with, Oracle of the Shapeshifters and the Fairytale Oracle, tend to be the darkest in tone. I suppose Les Vampire as well, but I didn't feel that, I don't know, Les Vampire and Oracle of the Shapeshifters, like Oracle of the Shapeshifters just felt a little bit more in alignment with this comparison for me than Les Vampire and Divine Circus. So you're working with individual beings with each card, and you are kind of doing a little bit more of a meatier focus in your work. You're looking more at, you know, core roots of things instead of just surface, as I said before. So to compare and contrast as far as the deck size is the same. I am using the new matte borderless version of Divine Circus for this, and I do have a reveal of that I'm going to be uploading that I had recorded a few weeks ago and forgot to upload. So that's going to be uploading around the same time as this. But this is Divine Circus. It's just different backings, matte cardstock, and no borders. So this is what you've got for the decks. I dislike this border, this backing, but if you are someone who enjoys this, then you're going to really love that backing, and this is the backing for Divine Circus. When it comes to the guidebooks, you're looking at roughly the same size. So meaty guidebooks for both of these, ones that you can really sink your teeth into. Just to give you a comparison, because I was asked to be a little more specific with things, in Alana's you have the card title and a small black and white reproduction. Then you have one paragraph that kind of like, in my opinion, kind of like sums up the main meaning of the card or the feel of the card. Then you go into the card meaning. Then there's the healing trick. And after that is an affirmation. So you get at least a page to 3 pages for each one. And for Jasmine's, we have a little bit larger card to pick, not Jasmine's, for Lucy's, with illustrations by Jasmine Beckett Griffith, we have a little bit larger card reproduction and more space spent on the card title. Now in Lucy's deck, there's a few words or a few key phrases underneath the card title on the card itself. And that's repeated in the guidebook. And then there is about the card, which talks about the card, like the general meaning. Then there's the card itself speaking, which may be a slightly different message than the general. And then there's the divination message, which may be different than those two prior. So with Lucy's decks, you really want to read the guidebook if you're trying to understand her stance on the cards. And she does feel you should know your guidebook. You don't want to just well, I shouldn't say you don't want to. I mean, do what feels right for you. But I read the entire card meaning anytime I'm just like maybe doing a daily draw or trying to do some more specific spiritual work for myself. I will read the entire thing through because some of it can seem conflicting, comparing like the card speaks to about the card and then the divination. So if I read all the way through, then I kind of can see the big picture of what she's saying, and I can apply that to any given situation. So just so that you can see what this looks like. So there's that, then there's the about, the card speaks, and then there's the divination. Neither of these decks have set reversal meanings, so that is something that you can view the card as contrary or being blocked. If it shows up for you reversed, if you don't read reversals, then I would just go with the card meaning and your intuition for the card that you draw. Okay, so let's get into looking at some of the card images. Now, I'm not going to compare what I think are close to each other because they are totally different decks. So with this aspect of comparing, I'm really going to focus more on how I would read with them, when I would choose to read with them, and how I might use them as clarifiers. I'm not going to go into a card by card play by play, excuse me, because I just think that they're different decks. So I'm going to show you a little bit and talk about the deck. I'll show you the other deck, talk a little bit about that, and then I'll talk about reading with them. And hopefully this feels in-depth enough for the viewer that requested this. So here are images from the Divine Circus, which I'm showing you as I talk. I am working on the lighting in the new space, guys. Thank you for your patience with that. So this deck is a very, very honest, cut to the point deck. I use this deck a lot with Reiki clients at the end of a session because it kind of cuts right to the heart of the matter for them, and it lets them leave with clarity and insight as they head out the door. And so they have something they can take with them that feels really grounding and very clear. Now, when I say it's a straight shooter, I mean that it is really going to talk about what's at the heart of a matter. So it's not a deck for the faint of heart. For some people, it's too much. I don't find it to be that case at all. I think it's a very loving deck. I think it's just very honest, and it wants to help you work with what's actually going on. So it's going to be real. It's not going to sugarcoat things. It's not going to make things seem better than they are. It's going to be very honest. There is some nudity in this deck. I think I already showed a naked woman. I apologize for not warning everyone. So there's no nudity in Oracle of the Shapeshifters. So you are also, the feel is a little bit darker than Oracle of the Shapeshifters, but Oracle of the Shapeshifters itself is not a lightweight deck. I don't think it's for the faint of heart. I think this is my favorite image, as you guys know, from Divine Circus. I think it's pretty real, but Divine Circus especially is very, very much upfront, real, honest, no holds barred. It's going to tell you the truth whether you like it or not. So those are some images from Divine Circus, so you can get a feel. There are multiple artists in this. It can be a little bit jarring. Lucy's deck, Jasmine's the only artist, and it's Jasmine's traditional feel, but you will see from some of the card meanings, like Little Red Riding Hood, I am not a victim. Beauty and the Beast, you need some space in a relationship. They are dealing with real issues, not sugarcoating things. So in both of these decks, you're going to get, so this is remember your alliances, reconsider your alliances, make new connections. So it's going to be very clear about what's going on, what it is you need to look at when you draw cards from this deck. Side point completely, the card stock in Divine Circus is 1,000 times better than the card stock in Oracle of the Shapeshifters, at least the edition I have. The images are not as dark or a lot less perhaps disturbing for some people. in this deck. So if you want a heavy hitter, straight shooter, an honesty teller, but you don't want some of the darker imagery that's in Divine Circus, then Oracle of the Shapeshifters may be an option for you. It manages to, like, here's Mermaid in a Koi Pond, rediscover your individuality, become the dragon. So find solutions in the unknown places, in the darkness, deep dark sea mermaid. So you see that we're getting into meaty stuff. Like, we're looking at what's underneath the surface of something, not just is a situation going to improve, but like, how did you get where you are in the situation? Both of these decks are going to help you do that. So I think they're both very worthwhile decks. They're decks that I've had in my collection for years, and I'm very, very thankful that I get to work with them. And I do use them in readings for other people with very positive outcomes, excuse me, for my clients. As I said, Divine Circus tends to work a lot with people who come in for energy work and less in readings. Oracle of the Shapeshifters is more of a reader deck and less energy work. Love this image. So if you're looking at, let's say you're trying to decide between these two decks, both have amazeballs guidebooks. Like, you're going to be happy with the guidebooks for both. You won't be disappointed. Even if you find the deck's not your cup of tea, the guidebooks have plenty of information to give you a jumping off point. You're not going to feel like somebody created a throwaway guidebook that you can't reference. I reference both of these guidebooks all the time with great personal growth experienced from that. So both the guidebooks, amazing. Check, check. Cardstock quality on the newer version of Divine Circus, definitely much better than Oracle of the Shapeshifters, unless there's been a reprint and I'm not aware of that. So cardstock wise, matte, better quality cardstock for sure in Divine Circus. Imagery. If you like darker themed art, you're going to prefer Divine Circus. If you like lowbrow pop art, you're going to love Oracle of the Shapeshifters. If you like a unified art theme, so one artist, you will prefer Oracle of the Shapeshifters. I find the back and forth between artists and Divine Circus jarring, but the deck is so great as a deck that I let that go in this case. It's a very notable exception. This and the Light Gray Tarot are probably the only decks that I've kept with multiple artists over the years. So, you know, of collecting and having decks come in and out. If that's a drawback for you, then I would go with Oracle of the Shapeshifters. What I turn to for Divine Circus Oracle for in a reading, if I'm reading for somebody else, root cause of situations and encouragement on how to proceed moving forward. Oracle of the Shapeshifters is a kick-ass clarifying deck. It does not muddy a reading. It lets you know exactly where, you know, what's going on in the situation. So I'm going to give you an example of that now. Let's say I'm reading with Tarot of Vampires, and I'm reading for somebody and they want to know if they should take a new job offer. And we have Two of Scepters is drawn for that, and I ask for clarification from Oracle of the Shapeshifters, and I get Bats in the Belfry, you can achieve great things. Well, with Two of Scepters and Bats in the Belfry, this new job that this person's considering taking, this is super clear for me that as long as they continue to believe in themselves, this is absolutely a great choice for them moving forward on their life path. So you can see how fast Oracle of the Shapeshifters is able to clarify things. The key meanings underneath the title of the card are very, very helpful. It's awesome. Insofar as, especially if you're new to reading, they're going to help get that intuition activated. They're going to give you a jump start in a reading. If you feel really stuck somewhere and you pull from this deck, you know, two kittens you must choose, right? Like, this is going to help you find the direction forward that's going to allow your client to have the greatest level of understanding on their behalf, and for you to know what the story is that's being told in your cards that you're reading for the individual. So very positive insofar as using as a clarifier in readings. Now, for personal work, Divine Circus I use for shadow work because honestly it's ball buster, and sometimes I'm not in the right space to hear whatever it is that this deck needs to tell me. And so when I am in the right space for that, then I do find that this is a great deck for shadow work. And I have to be, again, in the right space to hear the message, because it's always truthful and it's always right on. Oracle of the Shapeshifters, I use a lot to understand why I am where I am if I feel stuck. So let's go back to that job thing. Let's say this time I'm reading for myself and I'm considering taking a new job, but I'm really worried about the stability and security. I would use Oracle of the Shapeshifters to give me clarification on that stability and security, what that would look like going forward, but also in understanding, I don't want to say this right. Also in understanding why I'm worried about that in the first place, if that makes sense. And Oracle of the Shapeshifters can do that in a very sweet and simple way, or if I want to go right down into it, I can get out that guidebook and I can journal off of the guidebook. If you are someone who likes to use affirmations, Divine Circus includes affirmations with each card, so you have that added bonus there. If you are someone who is looking for a divinatory meaning, but not so much an affirmation to take away from the card work with, as in you can always create your own affirmations, but I know some people like to have them in the guidebooks. Oracle of the Shapeshifters isn't necessarily going to give you the affirmation. So, you know, that's something to consider as you're looking to purchase them. As far as the individual voices of the deck creators, I'm not going to speak to the artists, the multitude of artists individually in Divine Circus Oracle. I will say that Jasmine has a very clear artistic voice. It's very easy to discern the feelings and emotions she wants you to experience as you look at her artwork. And she absolutely, in the art that she chose for this deck, to be a part of this deck, she did a beautiful job in the imagery matching the card meanings, and they both together did that. But the artist is also a large part of that process. So, as far as the artists in Divine Circus, I think some of them really hit the mark. Some I don't prefer their style, and so that's difficult for me, and I will leave it there. I've done reviews and reveals and discussions about Divine Circus of the Wazoo. You can look at my channel and access any of those if you want more of my viewpoint on that. The voices of the deck creators. Lucy identifies as a witch. She definitely embraces the dark as well as the light. So both of these creators don't have a problem discussing either. Lucy is sweeter, I think. I think she's no less potent, but she's a little bit sweeter in her messages. And sometimes will take us on a meandering path to get to the place where we're going, which is beautiful and sometimes very necessary. Alana can sometimes talk a lot about the same thing, but I think she's trying to use different phrasing to help people who see things differently. Like, I might get it in the first paragraph. Somebody else might need to read what she wrote in the third paragraph in order to understand the main message. So I think she's trying to help all of us be able to understand the main feeling from her deck and from each card that you're working with. And she tries to reach a myriad of individuals through that. She's very much focused on healers, and her voice is very much attuned to healers. And she is someone who works with light energy a lot. Now, Divine Circus certainly has its dark feels, so it's not at all, she's not against darker energy, but I think of the two, her feeling typically is more of a light worker. However, she has no problem going to the darker places, and in Divine Circus you definitely feel that. She addresses things in there that get to the, again, root cause of the issue. So if you want something that's sweeter but just as deep, I would go with Oracle of the Shapeshifters. So sweeter or gentler. If you want something that's more kick-ass but more wordy, then I would say go with Divine Circus in this case. So figure out that dance for yourself and where you land on that. Now, the beauty of having both decks is that you can go to either one when you're looking for that particular wisdom. Both of these decks, I mean, I'm very happy to have both of them. If I had to make a choice and it was one or the other, I would choose Divine Circus just because of my history with Divine Circus. I mean, I love both of these decks, so I wouldn't want to be without either of them. Please don't misunderstand me on that. But Divine Circus is really, really delicious, and this way that's very confronting. Like, half the time I don't like the deck, and I'm like, I'm going to donate this thing, and then I never do, and I end up working with it fairly regularly. So I have to say that there's something very special about Divine Circus. So Divine Circus would be my choice of the two, but both are very worthy additions to any collection. If you have to make a choice to get started and you're newer on your Oracle journey, I'd go with Oracle of the Shapeshifters. If you have to make a choice and you're a seasoned reader and you love Oracle decks, I would say start with Divine Circus. So, if that gives you any guidance. Again, like I said, very meaty guidebooks. You will not be disappointed with the guidebooks. Divine Circus is like 129 pages. And Lucy's is 172. But just remember that there is a lot more space here in Lucy's as opposed to Alana's, which just gets like right into it. So yeah, that's my side-by-side comparison of Oracle of the Shapeshifters and Divine Circus Oracle. I hope this helped for the viewer who requested, and I'll do a series if you guys like and keep comparing the two. Yeah, so let me know what you think. Much love, many blessings, guys. See you in the next video.